And now comes in a very exciting time, and that is for our doctoral candidate to spend 20 minutes speaking about her proposed study that she is busy working on currently. It is a bit of a daunting time for our candidates, but it's exciting. So we hope as we are presented with Yosheen's topic, a conceptual technology adoption framework, Africa leapfrogging 4IR and 5IR technology, that you will really think of questions to help her and to assist her. And Yosheen, for us, we want to know, what is your problem statement? What methodology are you using, etc. But I would like to comment on one thing, and that is, it's always a pleasure for me to introduce our doctoral students, because our doctoral candidates, as we like to call it, at doctoral level, you speak more of a candidate than a student, is around the fact that our doctoral candidates are brilliant managerial leaders already. So, Yosheen, you are already agile, aligned, and engaged as a Chief Information Officer. I know you're at Tsebo Solutions Group now, but you've got 24 years of experience within the JSE listed and global multinationals. And so for me, I think, it's incredible the way you work for over 2 decades in the technology team at F&B, the work you've done at Momentum Metropolitan, but it's about your ability to understand the management of innovation and technology, as I said earlier with both of you about agility, but also technology and people. And for us, that is about alignment in the Da Vinci TIPS managerial leadership framework. And it is such a critical aspect when you look at things like global and digital citizenship, computational thinking, etc., that the co-creation of meaning and the co-creation of direction really leads to the management of technology and people. And I really believe that that is what your study is going to contribute in the larger scheme of things. So I look so forward to hearing what you have to say. I know 20 minutes is an elevator pitch in research, but we look forward to that and people popping in questions, etc. Over to you, Yosheen.
Sure, thank you. I am going to share a quick slide. So I'm going to chat to you about my study, which is a conceptual technology adoption framework, and purely focusing on Africa leapfrogging 4IR and 5IR technology. I have done a visual representation of the study, which I'll talk through quickly. But from a background perspective, transformation through technology and innovation is happening in Africa. Financial institutions service, customers in sub-Saharan Africa using mobile phones and have moved from preventing, barriers in terms of traditional banking profiles. In rural Cameroon, there's people that are getting medical assistance using, medical tablets, and there's drone technology that's being used in Rwanda. And through artificial technology, understanding health stats in that particular space. But the success hides a harsh reality in actuality. The key for Africa to leapfrog financial investment is in infrastructure creation of robust, regular ecosystems, explicit investments, and research and development in technology, and focuses on science. If you look at literature out there, the adoption of 4IR across the globe is progressing exponentially. In comparison to the world, the adoption rate of and realization of benefits of Industry 4 remains low in Pan-African countries. And according to the Euler-Hermann-Heims Digital Index, many of you may know it as the EDI, which is an indicator that computes the adaptness and responsiveness of countries to capitalize on breaching the digital barrier regarding technology adoption, Africa is still lagging behind the rest of the globe in their 2019 report. And the Digital Adoption Index, which is the DAI, which is a global indicator that evaluates the rate of digital adoption of 180 countries, which was created by the World Banking Group And it appraises countries against three key economic aspects, or the economic environment. It's people, government, and businesses. And it illustrates the average adoption index across the globe. It's shown that African countries features in the bottom right quadrant, and evidence that there's a problems in terms of slow adoption rate in comparison to nations across the globe. With my personal experience in the industry over 24 years and working in Pan-Africa and internationally, this is something that this is a business problem that I have recognized to exist, particularly in my role as the CIO at Momentum Metropolitan for the rest of Africa. And, this is what piqued my interest in terms of pursuing this particular view as to how do we leapfrog Africa in terms of adoption from a 4IR and 5IR technology perspective. And if you look at the challenges that the so-called first world countries are facing right now, they've got a lot of legacy issues that they bog down with in terms of capitalizing on the opportunity to implement and adopt these newer technologies, which Africa has an untapped advantage, as opposed to these more developed and mature economies, and they're not burdened by those particular challenges. So what is holding Africa back? And that's I guess, the key or core being of the study that I'd like to do from a research perspective. And it has raised the question for me is in terms of what is a sustainable conceptual framework of adopting technology in financial industries in Africa. And it's quite interesting that Albert mentioned in his earlier discussion that, financial institutes are slow to adopt. So, there is something there that needs to be uncovered. I think the objective of the study is to analyze the technology adoption rate of financial institutions across Africa, and to examine the technology adoption frameworks used in financial institutions. So what piqued my interest in the study, I did say to you that from a professional perspective, I have had extensive exposure in terms of working and trying to roll out innovation and technology in Africa. So that's the core reference. But on a personal level, I grew up in a township in Chatsworth, Durban, under the apartheid government, and until we achieved freedom in 1994. And during this time, I lived a rather sheltered life where my parents protected me from the reality of the struggles that were happening around me for freedom. And when I did eventually realize, the realities of what had surrounded me, it's changed the way I looked at the world forever. And in terms of my personal journey, and in conjunction with my ontological view of Hinduism, which is a philosophy steeped with a broad array of freedom of thinking from an analogy perspective, and it supports the reality that of plurality of entities, virtues, and relationships. And I believe that the world is made up of many different parts of truths that are created and assembled together as part of that. And steeped in that, I have chosen a pragmatic paradigm for this particular study, to understand, both using a positivistic view and an interpretistic view in terms of this particular research study. So At a particular point in time, I would like to understand and review of what's happening, and then take you through, I guess, the deductions that are made using both deductive and inductive reasoning to get to the view and answer the questions. In terms of my research questions, from a research question perspective, and I've included these, but they're not limited to these, is what is the adoption rate of 4IR and technology advancements? So I did speak to you about the paradigm in terms of pragmatism, okay, from a paradigm perspective. And I think from a conceptual framework perspective, I will be looking at technology adoption, leapfrogging, 4IR and 5IR. From a theoretical framework perspective, I will look at the integral framework theory and the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology. Subsequently, I've added a few more through. I'm busy with my literature review, my detailed literature review now, but there's a few more theoretical frameworks that I will add to this particular piece of the study to guide me in terms of getting down to the right answers. So the one that I will include now is the DOI in terms of innovation penetration, and then in terms of the diffusion of innovation, and then the technology organization environment framework, the TOE, and then I would also include now the technology readiness index, which was the TRI, in context to understand the challenge to accelerate technology adoption in Africa. From a research design perspective, I think I was going through my questions. Let me just get back to my questions. So the first one is, why is the adoption rate of 4IR and technology advancements lagging in Pan-African organizations comparative to the rest of the world? Is there a perception that Africa is lagging in technology advancements, a fair generalization? What factors would speed up the adoption of these technology advancements in these organizations, and what factors slow them down? What is a sustainable conceptual framework to adopt technology in financial institutions in Africa? And in terms of using pragmatism as the research paradigm, I will use both qualitative and quantitative instruments to investigate this or study this problem. In terms of using a mixed method approach. And in terms of the quantitative side of things, the hypothesis that I'm looking at is that a conceptual framework has a positive effect on the adoption of technology for financial institutions in Africa. So in terms of trying to understand where to start with in terms of, the sample size, who would this be relevant to in terms of, from a study perspective, in terms of validity of the study. And interesting, I just want to share the next slide. According to the United Nations, there are 54 countries in Africa, and there has been a study done, which is an annual survey in terms of ranking the top 250 organizations in Africa per industry. And based on this study was done by Mini in 2020. I'm not sure if there's a later one now. which will then form part of the literature review. But by industry, the financial services industry seems to rank organizations, or most of the organizations rank in that top 250. And it's also given a split in terms of where that split resides within Africa. So in terms of my study, I'm looking to apply both research designs, both qualitative and quantitative research techniques to understand a sample size that sits in the top performers from an economy perspective, countries that sit in the middle layers and countries that sit in the lower level of this particular view. And the other key important output would be to understand, with further analysis based on my expertise and experiences, to limit it to Southern Africa, West Africa, and East Africa, based on data that's coming out in terms of, where there's been high levels of innovation uptake, and how do we move that to the next level. So in terms of the methods that would be used for the study, I think from a primary data perspective, there'll be data collection that will be done through a survey instrument and targeting CEOs, CIOs, COOs in these particular chosen countries, and also using secondary data collected by or statistics collected, raw statistical data collected by the World Bank surveys and other sources to understand and analyze the problem and the output in terms of understanding the levers and the factors that influence the adoption rate in Africa. And then in terms of, using triangulation to validate and verify the information gathered, and then also convergence in terms of comparing and contrasting the qualitative and quantitative data that's collected, and using techniques that would be appropriate in terms of either descriptive analysis, regression analysis, factor analysis, etc., in terms of techniques and how to understand presenting that data by using visualizations and graphs, etc., to present the findings.
So I was just hoping maybe what you could summarize is just two things, which I think is really imperative at doctoral level, is what do you think the absolute, in one or two sentences, unique contribution of your study is, so how you will contribute to new knowledge? And then the second part of it being, what do you think your social return on investment or return on investment of the study will be for the community?
So in terms of contributing, the unique factor in terms of this particular study is that through the literature, there is a gap in terms of understanding why, from an African context, we're not able to capitalize and leverage of rolling out these technologies or adoption of these technologies and bearing, I guess, the benefits of that. So despite, all these various academic undertakings and trying to understand, operational efficiencies and new business models in terms of 5IR, there's a gap that still remains regarding specific technology adoption models and their constructs that has been identified to influence 4IR technology implementation, particularly at an organizational level in Africa. And through the study, that is exactly what I'm hoping to contribute. That's the first one. And then from a social contribution perspective, just working in Africa and understanding personally some of the barriers and challenges as to why technology is not adopted at the rate, is hoping to understand those particular levers to make sure that communities are part of the journey in terms of accelerating that adoption rate. So that's what I'm hoping to land.
Thank you so much for that. Are there any other specific points you wanted to add, or could I maybe open the floor for questions? I see there's already 2 questions coming. That's why I'm asking.
No, you can open the floor to questions.
Thanks,
There's so much to cover. I'm jumping around.
Okay, no, it's very difficult to put it all in. So you've got a question. I'm just going in the order that they've come. You've got a question from Peter, from Dr. Shirley Lloyd, and from Professor Klopper.
Thank you, Marla, and Yosheen, congratulations on this journey. It's for us that are aspiring. It's we're looking forward for you to be able to succeed, so we can follow. 2 questions, and for me, you are really qualified to be asking a soon to be a doctorate candidate. But here's while you were talking that I thought maybe I should ask. The first thing is that yes, there's a perception of the slow intake of technology from an African perspective. But the question here and whether you've considered that, is that are there other issues that could be, for example, culturally, drivers that might impede technology to the adoption of technology versus just really the theoretical knowledge of that? Because a quick example would be M-Pesa in Kenya, where it organically grew, and where the norm would have been that would have taken too long to grow up, but because of the community required that, it grew organically. And is maybe some questions relating to, do we really know enough about the cultures within African perspective, and whether those questions really cover the people or the knowledge instead of us really saying that there's a slow intake, rather than saying, maybe let's understand the environment. The second point would be, yes. Now, when you said that you chose your sample size, one of the things that we know from an African perspective is the migratory to urban environment. Now, and the urban in terms of the access to technology and all the other things, for example, electricity and all of that. How much would you be considering that as a factor that might impact your sample size and your information in that? For example, if you choose an African country, like let's say Uganda, and you only get questions from an urban perspective, would it be enough for you to have say that you've got enough knowledge about Uganda, where you'd find that the migration or the urbanization in the country might be higher or lower, which might affect your answers to what you're seeking for? Thank you.
So great points. I think on the first one, you hit the nail on the head, because if you read my proposal, there's quite, I guess, a high concentration in terms of community and culture in terms of answering that question. And that's why one of my research questions is that, do we consider it to be, a generalization when we say it's slow adoption? And what are those other factors? So definitely, yes, the cultural drivers become very important. And I think firsthand, in terms of my experience and exposure in Africa, that's something that plays such a big part in terms of success when it comes to adoption of technology, just on a personal level in terms of some of the projects that I've worked on. And then quite an interesting question in terms of, the urban versus the rural representation in the sample. And to be honest, Peter, I think I haven't really thought about how. So firstly, in terms of the sampling, I'd like it to be, randomized. But I think in terms of answering the question or adding the value, I do have to explore both factors. So that is something that I'll think about and include. I really, really didn't think about that upfront.
And I suppose that's the purpose of this, Yosheen, is to be able to get that advice. So, Peter, thank you for that. And I think this is very important. So, Dr. Lloyd?
Thank you very much. And thank you. Yes, I was also going to mention the cultural issue and also possibly some of the factors that could lead to a so-called slow adoption, if we use that term, could be issues of infrastructure, and also a difficult thing to talk about, but a very real thing, is the legacy of colonialism. Yes. Whether the colonialism be from the Belgians, the French, the Germans, the Dutch, whoever. But that sort of cultural impact as well. But my, I suppose, comment, two of them. You talk throughout the presentation, and thank you. I think it's an extremely important study. But you talk about Africa, and then you talk about other countries. You talk about the global space. So I would like to see greater clarity. Are we talking about comparing continent to continent, because Africa is a continent, and other continents such as Europe, Asia, etc.? Or are we talking about regions in Africa? Or are we talking about certain countries in Africa compared to other countries in Europe? So what is your benchmark against which you're drawing the statistics and the notion of slow adoption? So clarify that a little more, I think, in your study. And then also, obviously, a very clear clarification of what 4IR is, what 5IR is. Yes. Again, if you're looking at it, country, region, or continent, there might already be differences of adoption. So I think that clarity for the reader at the end of the day, because often in research, researchers are criticized because it almost seems as if they're comparing apples with pears. So is it a continent to continent comparison, or country to country, region to region? What is your benchmark? So if you say we are slow adopters in Africa, compared to who? Compared to Asia, Europe, the Americas, whatever. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So Shirley, maybe
and good luck for your study.
Thank you. Maybe just a quick comment. I think when I started this journey, right, I started right up at the continent level. So continent to continent, dropped down to regional, and then on a country basis, I have looked at countries within Africa where there's data available. So yes, I guess good point in terms of how I present that and clarify that with the ongoing study.
Yosheen, thank you so much, Dr. Lloyd. As a supervisor herself with successful students through, I certainly think, the comments coming from people are important for us to address. So I see you've generated a lot of interest, Yosheen, so we've got quite a few questions and limited time. So what I'm going to ask is that the people pose the questions, you take the notes and consider them. And then Dr. Good has put a comment, which I think is very useful in the chat. And I've asked her if she would be willing to speak to you because she said she can discuss it offline, and I think it's a very useful point. So if she provides you with her details there, then I think you should. Prof. Klopper, I see is his question, but he can speak with you after Dr. Sigamoni's also put a comment. So Alan and Janet, if you can ask your questions, and Yosheen, if you can see what they have to say in relation to your study, Alan, and then Janet, and then we'll wrap up.
I'm just interested in the scale of your study population, or population of your study. You're looking across geography, different areas. But it's a Pan-African study. It's a mixed method study. I can imagine you're going to have such an avalanche of information, a lot of variables. I mean, how are you going to distill this down into what you want to solve. I can imagine you're gonna spend quite a long time, a lot of research instruments, a lot of analysis, qualitative, quantitative. Would you, if I mean, I don't want to be in your shoes because I can see you have a mountain to climb there. Would you consider, a specific area, maybe look at South African context, look at a particular sector on adoption of 4IR? Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yes, I would consider that. I think initially I started off really ambitiously with saying, how do we leapfrog Africa? And then I've reduced it to financial institutions within Africa. And then I reduced it to regions, which was Southern Africa, East Africa, and West Africa. I guess I need further consideration in terms of the mountain and information that I'm going to get, and realistically how soon I would like to finish the study. But I think in terms of adding the value, just looking at it through a Southern African lens does not do justice to Africa leapfrogging 4IR and 5IR. So that's the dilemma I face right now. But it's something I do have to consider seriously.
I agree. And I see Dr. Segamoni has also agreed with you, Alan. So thank you for the valuable points. Janet?
Stunning. Thank you, Yosheen. Congrats. It's a great topic. I want to echo what Alan said. When I listened to what you were saying, I thought this is a monstrous study. And maybe just, a reflection of that was your research questions. Mm-hmm. Each one of those independently could be a big study. So just to add to that voice, one of the questions, and these are literally just questions for you to reflect on. When you talk about adoption, I'm very curious about how they measure that, just for starters. Mm-hmm. Are you talking about generic adoption or adoption of different specific types of technology? Would be a question that immediately comes to mind for me. The comment made earlier about M-Pesa kind of speaks to me around the whole psychological side of things. Are we talking change readiness? Mm-hmm. Where does that come into all of this? And then the other really important thing, I think, especially in an African context, is skewed demographics. We might find that some of our organizations are actually way ahead of the curve. Mm-hmm. And some of them are just may never get there. Who knows? But yeah, that's obviously just an interesting, fascinating. And I guess I would be curious to say, if there was one thing that you could actually address,
yes,
what might that be? That might help narrow it down.
Yeah, and I think Janet's point is very valid. I think a lot of people have commented on the scope of your study, and it is really important for you to be able to hone in on exactly what you want to do. And we can always connect you with people within the Da Vinci network if you want to connect with some of the people. So Dr. Good has left hers, for example, her details through Mompati. We can always connect you with other people if you need to ask further questions to others that have posed questions and you want some clarity, etc., or anyone within the space. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Yosheen, for your time, for your very interesting topic, as many people have put there, your bravery. And I now hand over to Letta in closing to give you her visual of what you have said this evening.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kunin. So here's what I heard. There's massive transformation in technology. People are banking online. They're getting medicines delivered by drone. But in Africa, we need infrastructure and adoption. If we look at the measurements around people, government, and businesses, Africa is in the bottom 25%. Africa doesn't have legacy problems like the first world, but we are very slow to adapt and adopt, specifically in financial institutions. You spoke about the pluralities, different truths, your pragmatic approach, and then the research questions. Why is the adoption rate of 4IR and tech advancements lagging? Are we really lagging, and how can we speed it up in a sustainable way? You're going to be focusing on top, medium, and low economic performing countries in Africa and benchmark with countries with a high tech uptake, both qualitative and quantitative. And the new knowledge that you're focusing on is why we are not adopting these new technologies, with the idea that you'll be able to identify what are those barriers to remove for the advantage of local communities. We've spoken about the impact of culture. We've spoken about the impact of colonialism, taking that into account. also looking at urban versus rural, and then clarify the comparison. Apples to oranges. Are you talking country? Are you talking continent? And that, Dr. Coonan, is the visual summary for this month's Curiosita. Back over to you.
Thank you so much, Letta. Much appreciated. Yosheen, I hope you see pride and joy in what is developing and you will have found this useful. Once again, to Albert, thank you for your valued contribution today, and to everyone for all your comments. I wish you a happy rest of your week. And we look forward to seeing you at the August Curiosita event. The invitations will go out, but you are welcome to register, join us, and we really look forward to it. Letta, your talent as always. We will send out Letta's image to everybody. And thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Stay safe. And also just stay positive. I know things are tough with our current economic climate and many other factors connected, but these type of debates keep our country and our continent moving forward. Thank you for your time. As I always say, time is priceless, and so you have given us your greatest gift. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.